Let's just take a closer look at this last Aristotle reading, just part one. This is the end of the politics. I want to emphasize what he says here in the first paragraph. He who would duly inquire about the best form of a state ought first to determine which is the most eligible life. The most eligible life. I think what the translator means by eligible is the most choice-worthy, really the best life, the life we should choose. And I think it's an important statement because it really reveals how Aristotle thinks of political philosophy, how he thinks of politics. When we're thinking about the best form of government, which is a characteristically pre-modern or ancient idea, is that you cannot determine the best form of government, best form of a state, unless you figure out how human beings are supposed to live. That is, what is the most eligible life. I'm not sure that modern political philosophy totally dispenses with that idea, but it's much more prominent. That is, if we're going to figure out government, if we're going to figure out what the best form of government for human beings is, we have to figure out ourselves. We have to determine what sort of creatures we are before we can determine what sort of government we should have, what form of state we should have. And if whatever form of government we choose, that form of government should be conducive to living the way we think we're supposed to live, or the most eligible life. So in part one of book 7, part one of this reading, Aristotle is interested in arguing, well, what are human beings supposed to do with their lives? How are they supposed to live? And he approaches that here by talking about the different sort of goods that a human being has in their lives. He says, assuming that enough has been said already in discussions outside the school, he's referring to his own school, the Lyceum, I think it was called, concerning the best life, we will now only repeat what is contained in them. Certainly no one will dispute the propriety of that partition of goods, which separates them into 3 classes, viz. External goods, goods of the body, and goods of the soul, or deny that the happy man must have all 3. So 3 sorts of goods: external goods, goods of the body, and goods of the soul. I'm pretty sure that what he means by external goods are things like wealth, honors, fame, whatever, but mostly wealth, good things. Goods of the body are things like health, strength, prowess. And goods of the soul are things like wisdom and virtue. And he says that the happy person must have all 3. That is, if you live in terrible poverty, that's a great barrier for being happy. If you live in terrible physical health, that's a great barrier to being happy. And if you have no wisdom, intelligence, or virtue, then that is a great barrier to being happy. So he's definitely saying that human beings, to be happy, must have some share in all 3. But he is ready to take on the question of which is most important. Which of these classes of goods is the most essential requisite for human happiness? And there's no doubt that he chooses the last, the goods of the soul. Right. One of the things he says, which is also very characteristic of Aristotle, is here on page 1, where he says, for whereas external goods have a limit, like any other instrument, and all things useful are of such a nature that where there is too much of them, they must either do harm, or at any rate be of no use to their possessors. Every good of the soul, the greater it is also of greater use. Aristotle thought you could have too much money, you could have too much wealth. Wealth is an instrument, he thought. It was not something we pursue for its own sake, but we pursue for the sake of other goods. So if we have enough money to actually take care of the kind of needs that money actually services, then there's no need for more money. You can have too much money, but you can't have too much virtue. You can't be too just or too intelligent or too wise or too virtuous. That these things, the goods of the soul, are the kind of things that are always good in an unqualified way, and really are the sort of greatest good that a human being can can reach towards, is developing themselves in terms of their acquisition of virtue and wisdom. So I think it's important to stress this, that well, the implication is that whatever form of government we choose, according to the Aristotelian way of thinking, the best form of a state, it will be the form of a state that will be the most conducive for the citizens, the citizens of that state, to actually be able to become good people. That is maybe not the modern liberal idea of government that we'll see. But it is, I would say, the pre-modern, the ancient, and probably medieval ideas that governments are set up to make the people better, or at least to allow them to become better, to allow them to reach their potential as human beings.